You've probably heard of Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power. I mean, it's one of the most talked about and honestly most controversial books out there. So is it some kind of masterpiece of strategy, or is it just a handbook for, well, sociopaths? Today, we're going to cut through all that noise and figure out what this book is really about. Let's get into it.
So let's just get right to the big question that hangs over this entire book. Is power a good thing or a bad thing? The book's whole point is to get us to stop thinking like that. It argues that power isn't good or evil, any more than, say, gravity is. It's just a force that exists. It simply is.
And this quote right here, it's the core philosophy of the whole thing. See, Greene went and studied thousands of years of human history. We're talking everyone from Machiavelli to Sun Tzu, to basically decode how power actually works in the real world. The book isn't telling you how you should behave. It's showing you how people do behave. Think of it like a field guide to human nature.
Greene's big idea is this. We are all, every single one of us, playing an invisible game of power. Like it or not, it's happening in the office, with our friends, even in our families. And the very first step, it's just realizing you're on the board.
And here's the kicker, you can't just decide not to play. If you ignore the game of power, you don't magically rise above it, you just become a pawn in someone else's game. So understanding the rules isn't about becoming some ruthless manipulator. It's about learning how to defend yourself and, navigate the world without getting run over.
Okay, so if it's not a moral compass, then what is it? Well, it's probably best to think of it as a decoder for human behavior. And with 48 laws, it can get a little overwhelming. So to make sense of it all, we can actually group them into three main ideas.
Everything pretty much falls into one of these three buckets. First, you've got self-preservation, that's your defense. Then there's proactive influence, that's your offense. And finally, you have the power of perception, which is all about managing how other people see you. So let's start where you should always start, with defense. Before you can even think about making moves, you have to learn how not to lose. And that's what self-preservation is all about. A lot of these laws are purely defensive. They're about spotting threats and avoiding the common traps that can completely take you out of the game before you've even started.
Let me ask you this. You ever been in a situation where you worked your tail off, you got amazing results, but for some reason, your boss or a senior colleague just seems annoyed? You feel this weird chill from them. It makes no sense, right? Well, according to Greene, that's not illogical at all. It's a classic power play.
And that very specific, very frustrating situation, it brings us to the book's very first law. And if you work for anyone, anywhere, this is probably one of the most critical rules to understand.
The psychology behind this is actually pretty simple. When you shine too bright, the people above you can feel insecure, like you're a threat to their position. Now, this doesn't mean you should hide your talents or do bad work. No way. It just means you have to be strategic. You got to make sure your wins also make your boss look good. That way, you're seen as an invaluable asset, not a threat.
And speaking of being strategic, here's another huge defensive law. You have to know who you're dealing with. You can't just apply the same strategy to everyone. Misjudging your opponent or your audience, well, that can be absolutely disastrous. So the advice is simple. Observe first, then act.
All right, so you've secured your position, you've got your defenses up. Now what? Well, now it's time to actually move forward. This next set of strategies is all about shifting from defense to offense. It's about how you can proactively use these dynamics to actually achieve your goals.
And a perfect example of this is law number 9. This one totally flips the script on how most of us think about convincing other people.
I mean, think about it. You might win an argument, but what have you really gained? A lot of the time, all you've done is create resentment. That verbal victory feels good for a second, but it's totally hollow. It is so much more powerful to just demonstrate your point with concrete actions. A real, tangible result will always be more persuasive than the best argument. You got to show people, not just tell them. Okay, now wait a second. These two laws, side by side, they seem not only contradictory, but kind of messed up, right? This is where the complexity of the book comes in. Law 2 is a warning that friends can easily become envious, but Law 14 suggests using the appearance of friendship to gather information. The point isn't to be a two-faced jerk. It's to understand that all relationships have strategic layers, and being naive about that is incredibly dangerous. This brings us to our third and final theme, which might be the most important of all, perception. Because in the game of power, how things appear is often way more important than how they really are. So managing your reputation isn't about being vain. It's about controlling a critical tool. Think about it. Your reputation walks into a room before you do. It colors everything you say and do. A great reputation can win you allies and intimidate your enemies without you even having to do anything. You have to build it carefully, and you have to defend it fiercely, because once it's seriously damaged, it is almost impossible to fully repair. And this law is just a brilliant lesson in managing perception. When you stay quiet in a conversation, people get uncomfortable. It's human nature. They feel this urge to fill the silence, and in doing so, they often reveal their own thoughts and intentions. All the while, your silence makes you seem more powerful, more calculated, and more in control. So, why does saying less work so well? Well, for one, the more you talk, the more likely you are to say something dumb. It just increases your odds. Second, as we said, your silence makes other people nervous, and they'll start talking, basically handing you information. And finally, and this is the best part, people tend to project all sorts of wisdom and power onto your silence. They'll assume you know more than you're letting on. It's an incredible way to command respect. So after going through all of these sometimes ruthless-sounding laws, what is the real takeaway here? Is the goal really just to become a master manipulator? Well, the book's conclusion actually points to something much, much deeper. This right here, this is probably the most important point of the entire book. The true value of these laws is defensive. Learning them is like getting a vaccine against the manipulation and the office politics that you are absolutely going to run into. Once you can recognize the patterns, you get to choose how to respond, instead of just being a victim of them.
So the path to real power isn't about controlling other people. It's about mastering yourself. Step 1 is just to develop the awareness to see the game for what it is. Step 2 is to get some self-awareness and understand your own emotional reactions and impulses. And step 3 is to use that knowledge to act with intention and strategy, instead of just reacting on impulse.
Look, at the end of the day, this book is a tool. It's a tool for understanding why people do the things they do. It's a controversial lens, for sure, but it is an incredibly powerful one for decoding the world around us. The greatest power this book can give you isn't the ability to manipulate, it's clarity. And really, that's the big question the book leaves you with, because once you start to see these patterns in the world, you can't unsee them. So the next time you're in a meeting or just hanging out with friends, ask yourself, knowing what you know now, how will you see the game differently?